Classic Chris Canny, Hour 2 of the Stephen A. Smith Show here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Plus premium gasoline, now with 4 levels of defense against gunk, wear, corrosion, and friction. You can also tune in for college football action tonight as USC hosts Utah. It's presented by Dr. Pepper. Coverage begins at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Trojans need to find a way to bounce back after that loss to the Cougars last weekend. Maybe that seat getting a little hot there underneath Clay Helton. But let's switch gears, Chris. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I mean, has Urban Meyer's name been tied to that at all in any way, shape, or form?
Just a little bit. But, you know, when they move away from the athletic director, it's usually probably a sign that, you know, somebody's going to be next on the chopping block, and Clay Helton, it seems like he's the guy.
Rent, don't buy, as the saying goes. Let's switch gears, do a little bit of baseball. Congrats to the New York Yankees, division champs once again in the American League East, another 100-win season, and then some.
Dan, I can't even enjoy it. I can't even enjoy it, and you know why. With this team, it's always been something. Earlier in the season, you're talking about the injuries. The Yankees have had 30 different guys on the IL, over 39 different individual IL stints. But last night, you know, you're watching the game, and you couldn't help but, you know, acknowledge the elephant in the room, that being Domingo German.
Yeah.
And being put on administrative leave by baseball, and there's the investigation behind the domestic violence allegations. And it's just one of those things that's disturbing, you know, because you look at it from the individual standpoint, and, you know, you have a zero-tolerance policy if you're baseball, if you're the New York Yankees, as they should. And so you have to do your due diligence and investigate these matters. But when you also look at how important Domingo German is to this team, you recognize that he's been the most reliable starting pitcher that they've had throughout the course of the season. In 24 starts, he's got an 18-4 record, and he's got 11 quality starts sprinkled into those 24 starts. So, again, the most consistent arm on that starting pitching staff, and now you're talking about not having him for the entire postseason for a team that has championship aspirations.
And we're not going to see him again. I mean, I know that this investigation is something that still has to run its course or whatever, but you could make a pretty safe assumption. I know our Buster Olney's reporting it as well. I mean, you put 2 and 2 together, Chris, because this is real life. This is way more important than baseball when something like this happens. But we are not going to see Domingo German on a big league mound the rest of this season as long as the Yankees run goes through October. And then this may even go into next season as well, but we'll deal with that once 2020 rolls around here. You talk about right now, though, and what this does to the Yankees pitching staff. And it's not like we're trying to minimize the circumstance here. This is very serious. This is extremely significant here, and it should be dealt with accordingly. The way it's being handled with the investigation and what comes of it, that's Domingo German's problem, and he has no one to blame but himself here. But there are still baseball games to play, and the Yankee season does go on here. You mentioned the starting rotation, and guys have gone down all season long for the Yankees, and they have done as good a job of overcoming injuries as probably any team that I can remember in baseball, with the wrath of guys hitting the injured list all season long that I can remember. But think back now with the return of Luis Severino, who only had a cup of coffee on the mound earlier this week. You know, he gave you 4 innings or whatever it was. He is clearly not stretched out yet. You're not going to see him stretched out to where you're talking about him going 7-8 innings in any start. That's not going to happen here in October. But think of how valuable he now becomes for this team in the wake of losing a Domingo German. I would have given Domingo German, at least in the first round when the Yankees were going to have home field advantage, I would have started him game 2. I say that because his splits, Chris, at home versus on the road, were so significantly different in favor of him pitching in the Bronx that I wanted to make sure that I gave him a start on a mound that he was comfortable in, and now that goes out the window. And now you move everybody up a notch.
Well, here's the thing. You just don't know what you're going to get from German once you get to the postseason. That's the only box that
we've never seen it before,
that he hasn't checked, because we've never seen it before. But in terms of what he's capable of, I mean, you could pencil Domingo German in for 4 or 5 quality innings, and I think that's exactly what Aaron Boone was thinking. If you look at his last 2 outings, they were piggybacks from the CC Sabathia actually starting those games, and Domingo German came in both of those games and pitched outstanding. So I think that kind of gives us some insight into how Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman were thinking of deploying Domingo German with their strategy. They've already came out and said, outside of James Paxton, you know, you're not going to see starters get a lot of length in the postseason. That's the Tanakas of the world, CC Sabathia, Severino.
Tanaka, I think you might, though. Well, I think you have to.
Well, I think Tanaka is possible, but I think they're also looking at potentially pairing Tanaka with one of those other starters. Maybe it's a J Happ or somebody like that.
I don't know if you could do that now.
But I think that's what but I don't think they have any choice now that Domingo German is not available. I mean, if Tanaka doesn't pitch well, there's going to be a short hook. Think about this. We saw it last year in the DS against the Boston Red Sox. Aaron Boone left CC Sabathia and Severino in there way too long. They went in there with a clear plan to try to ride those guys as long as they could, and it got late early for both of them in those situations. I think it was games 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So I think in this situation, Aaron Boone is looking at it and saying, you know what, outside of James Paxton, I'm not going to give a lot of leash to those other guys that are going to be starting games, because you're going to need CC Sabathia to start a game. You're going to need Tanaka to start a game. I mean, so
well, Tanaka's your game one. I mean, Tanaka's still the guy. And I know that Paxton has been on a great run here, but I mean, look, you're a Yankee fan, okay? Tanaka, to me, if you're asking me about any of these guys, he is still the one come October that I trust the most in a big start in the postseason.
And I know you're saying that based on what we've seen from Tanaka in postseasons past, especially that ALCS from 2 years ago against the Astros. But here's the thing. Tanaka has struggled to find his grip with his split finger pitch this season. He has. That's the reality of it. It's been inconsistent. He's flashed it. When he doesn't have that split finger, you're going to see some mistakes that are made. You saw it last night in the 4th inning against the Angels, Cole Calhoun with that solo home run shot. When Tanaka doesn't have command and he doesn't control that split finger pitch, it's going to make it tough for him, because you got to realize he doesn't have plus velocity on his fastball. He's not that guy anymore. So, I mean, you're going to have to rely on being crafty. You're going to have swing and miss stuff. And with his split being inconsistent, you wonder how effective Tanaka is going to be. That being said, we know that Tanaka does save bullets for the postseason. So he's still a guy that I trust. But I think that Aaron Boone is just trying to look for all the different options that he's going to have. And when you're looking at their pitching staff, both the guys that they have as starters and the guys that they have in the bullpen, I think that it's going to be an unconventional approach in terms of being able to put together the 27 outs in any given postseason game.
And that's how it's different now, right? From opposed to how it was, I'd say, even a couple of decades ago. You look at postseason baseball right now and how managers decide who's pitching, who's not pitching. It's really all hands-on-deck philosophy. Like, you know, in the regular season, you have starters, you have relievers. In the postseason, it's almost like you throw all that out the door. Yep. It doesn't even matter. You're going to bring in guys, no matter if they're a starter by trade or reliever. You're just mapping this thing out almost 3 outs at a time. That's how you have to look at it. But if you lay everything out there, what Aaron Boone is going to have to work with, okay, Tanaka, James Paxton, and Paxton, by the way, has never pitched in a postseason game before. We do not know what we're going to see from this guy. But
he's going to get every opportunity because you traded for him to be an ace.
And you have to, right. He was that 1A, supposedly by Severino. And Severino, yes, he's back. He's a guy you can start him, let's say, hope he goes 3-4 innings, or you can back him off of somebody and have him come on in relief of an opener, for example. Now, the Chad Green experiment has worked to a certain amount of success all season long, you know, using that as the opener. But you're not playing a postseason team each and every time you did that. That's the one concern I would have there.
But they're going to use Chad Green as an opener. And I think that Chad Green is probably going to be piggybacked by Luis Severino for 4 or 5 innings, try to get you to the that we have on our pitching staff and try to figure out what's our formula for success to be able to get those outs once we get to the postseason.
Now, you brought up CC Sabathia.
Yeah.
And we know that he is literally hanging on just to get to the finish line. That's what it appears. You know, we know that there's not much left in the tank.
Okay.
But I will tell you this, and this might be unpopular, and I know that probably there's a lot of Yankee fans out there who say, you know what, thanks for the memories, and that standing ovation he got the other night there in the Bronx, like that was kind of like the curtain call, that was it, that was the finale. Given the German news now, and you're down an arm, and this is even having Jay Happ, who's still there in the ready.
Yep.
But I still, Chris, would feel more comfortable giving the ball to CC Sabathia in a playoff game and having him grind out maybe 2-3 innings than I would giving the baseball to Jay Happ to start a game in the month of October.
Well, I don't think you're going to have any choice now with this German news. You're going to have to rely on both of them once we get to the postseason. I know a lot of the
maybe not Happ.
Well, you can say maybe not Happ, but who else are you going to go with? I mean, you look at the pitchers that they're going to have on the postseason roster, you tell me. I mean, you're going to have a choice of Luis Sessa and Nestor Cortez and all of those guys. You want those guys on the mound rather than Jay Happ?
Just to start a game, I'm saying.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I don't know if he's going to start a game, but you're going to use Jay Happ at some point in the postseason. I think that Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone have been clear about starters coming out of the bullpen. That's going to be an option for them when they think about the various machinations that they could have with the different guys in terms of trying to put it together. But I look at J-Happ as one of those guys that, I don't trust him. He certainly hasn't looked like the J-Happ that we saw in the second half of last year. And then the guy that Brian Cashman thought he was getting when he signed him in free agency this past offseason. But listen, you're in a position now where you're going to have to trust him because you don't have Domingo German as an option now. I mean, CC Sabathia and J-Happ were both guys that were question marks in terms of whether or not they would make the postseason roster. But based on this latest news that we've got, I don't think it's going to be any choice.
And you look at, still there is a quest for home field, and it's still big. I think it matters in a huge way between them and the Houston Astros. I mean, think about the championship series a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I know it was another season. I get that, but home team won every game in that series, did they not? This year when the Yankees and the Astros played head-to-head, the home team won every game but one. Yeah. Okay, so I think that still matters. You look at the Astros schedule the remainder of the season, and they're coming off a 5-game winning streak, by the way. They've got 3 with the Angels at home, then 2 in Seattle, and then 4 out there in Anaheim against the Angels. Those are teams, and we just saw the Angels here, right? They're a dead team walking. They're just playing out the string. I mean, Mike Trout.
It's hard to envision the Astros not winning 8 out of 10 of those games.
With that pitching, if they're going to pitch these guys,
it's hard to imagine that.
So, I mean, the Yankees are going to have to go out there. And look, the Yankees still have to go to Texas, for example. There's going to be some emotions there. Texas is closing out that ballpark. They're moving into a new place for next season. So it's not going to be.
For 2.
And you got Tampa, and Tampa's battling tooth and nail to get one of these wild card spots. Mm-hmm. Yankees are facing an uphill battle right now to get that 1 seed, and you never know, it could come back to bite them here.
No, it could come back to bite them, but the one thing that I think about when you start talking about the Yankees and their confidence in being able to win down in Houston, a couple of years ago when they went down there during the regular season, it was about, in 2018, trying to prove a point to the Astros that they were capable of winning down there after losing Game 7 of the ALCS in 2017. And if you remember, when they went down to Minute Maid Park early in that season, the Yankees ended up taking 3 out of 4 in 2018. So maybe that's some experience that this young group of guys can draw upon and give them some confidence if indeed they have to go on the road and play down in Houston 4 games in the ALCS. But I'm with you. I mean, this is an uphill climb for the Yankees if you don't have home field advantage in the American League, because that Astro team, that's a really good baseball team. They got stronger at the deadline by adding Zach Greinke to their starting rotation that features Justin Verlander and Garrett Cole. I mean, Garrett Cole, he just had his 300 strikeout earlier this week.
By the way, how much do you think...
That is a tough starting pitching rotation.
How much do you think Garrett Cole's going to get in free agency in the winter? I mean, wouldn't you like to be his agent and be Garrett Cole?
He's going to get a whole lot of money.
He's going to reset the market. He might get more than any starting pitcher ever got in free agency coming off of this season. I mean, he's been that good.
I don't know what it is down in Houston. I mean, it must be something in the water. You look at what they did a few years ago when they brought over Justin Verlander. You know, it's just one of those situations where he reinvented himself as a pitcher, and all of a sudden his plus velocity is back. And
they did the same thing to Charlie Morton.
And Charlie Morton as well. I mean, they just become dominant pitchers down there. So, I mean, it's got to be something that A.J. Hinch and his staff are doing down there with those guys. But the fact remains that the Houston Astros can play any kind of game you want to play. Those guys can hit for power. They can hit for average. They'll put the ball in play, and you know they're going to get lights out starting pitching. But I think the Yankees have the advantage when you start talking about going into the bullpen. So I think the big question mark, if and when these two teams do meet in the postseason, will be, can the Yankee starters keep the game close enough where the Yankees can get to their advantage, which would be the bullpen in the later innings? And
because you talk about bullpens, for example, you know, Presley's still on the mend with the knee injury there for the Houston Astros. He was a huge setup guy earlier in the season. Osuna, you know, he's had a track record, of course, but he's still a little bit iffy in that 9th inning.
But they did make moves during the deadline to try to fortify it. They got Biagini and they got Sanchez, who will be out of the bullpen. So we'll see what happens with that. But again, I still trust the Yankees bullpen, even with no Domingo German, no Dellin Betances, because he's out with the partially torn Achilles. Even without those guys, you still got Canely, you still got Britton, you still got Chapman. I mean, you still got some guys, Ottavino, even though he hasn't pitched well of late. You still got guys that you feel really good about. And again, when we're talking about postseason baseball, especially going up against a lineup like the Houston Astros, you need guys that have plus stuff. You need guys that can get swings and misses and get outs. And the Yankees bullpen has that in spades.
And the way that things are going to shake out for them, at least in the first round. Now, granted, this is assuming they don't get the home field advantage, okay? They're going to play the Minnesota Twins in the first round. There are 3 guarantees, 3 certainties, Chris, on this planet. There's death, unfortunately. Taxes also a big, unfortunately. and the Yankees beating the Minnesota Twins. That always happens. It doesn't matter what year it is, what decade it is. The Yankees have owned the Twins, whether it's the regular season, the postseason, and I know that there's different years and everything, but I would feel good if I'm a Yankee fan going into that first round against Minnesota, because Minnesota's starting pitching, for one, has tailed off considerably where they were in the first half of the season. Yes, they can rake. Yes, they've got 5 guys that have hit 30 home runs or whatever it is, but you know what happens in October. There were plenty of Yankee teams way back when who would mash all season long and then get quieted down by good pitching in October.
Well, here's the thing about October baseball. You're not going to get the glut of mistakes that you're going to get from back end of the rotation kind of guys in the regular season. And so for a team that has one more home run than the Yankees, you would be concerned about their ability to be able to hit for power. But again, you're not going to have guys staying in there and the starters being able to go long if they're not being effective.
Right.
And that's the thing. Aaron Boone is going to have a quick hook, so you're not going to have that opportunity to get a bunch of mistakes that lineup can feast off of. So I'm not worried about the Twins. And it's funny that you bring that up, because I almost look at it as a glass half full kind of thing, because if you don't get the best record in baseball, yeah, you're going to have to go on the road in the ALCS. But guess what? You also don't have to face the winner of that wild card, which would be probably the Oakland A's. And you don't want to have to deal with going out to Oakland for 2 games. So I look at this and say you probably have a tougher matchup once you get to the ALCS without having home field advantage, but you have an easier matchup in the DS.
And something, I don't know what it is. I've been saying this for the last couple of months. I still would be afraid if they get in and find a way of the Cleveland Indians. I have one of those weird feelings, like a couple of years ago when the Yankees picked them off when Cleveland was the huge favorite, and nobody saw that coming. I just think you can never sleep on this team. They have a few pitchers they can throw at you with plus stuff. They can shut down a lineup. It's all about Ramirez getting healthy and going out there and proving that he's a capable bat once again. But that is a team I would just want I'd feel much better in the first round playing the Minnesota Twins, clearly, than the Cleveland Indians any day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, those teams are scrappy, right? When you look at the Braves, you look at the A's, and you look at the Indians, all of those teams are scrappy, and if you're a Yankees fan, you'd really rather not have to deal with those guys in the first round. So give me Minnesota all day, every day, and we'll see what happens with that. But again, I think everybody's kind of waiting on the matchup of 2 of the best teams in baseball, which are the Astros and the Yankees in the CS.
Dan Graca, Chris Canny, in for Stephen A. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Another big development here in New York during the week was the end of the Eli Manning era again as the starting quarterback, because they made the move to Daniel Jones probably a lot sooner than a lot of us thought that it was going to be. I don't think we anticipated week 3 being when they were going to turn the offense over to the rookie picked 6th overall from Duke. But unfortunately for Eli Manning, and you played with him, you have a Super Bowl ring partially because of Eli Manning and what he was able to do there. And this is what I said at the beginning of the season, which was just a couple of weeks ago now, but I never thought it was necessarily going to be Eli Manning's play specifically which sent him to the bench. I think it was more going to be of circumstances of the team around him, and I think that's exactly what led to this move being made.
No, you're absolutely right. I think this move being made has nothing to do with how Eli Manning has played the first couple of weeks of the season. I don't think he's been the problem, but he's also not the solution, and that's the reality of where the Giants are at right now. When you look at how bad their defense is, I think ownership and management looked at it and said, this team is not going to be capable of being very competitive. We're not going to be capable of trying to be in the postseason picture once we get to the second half of the season. And so if that's going to be the case, if we're going to lose with Eli Manning as our starting quarterback, we might as well lose with the purpose of getting our young guys some on-the-job experience, and that way he's in better position going into year 2. Think about this. When Eli Manning was a rookie, the Giants were 5-4 under Kurt Warner, and they made the decision to hand off the baton from
better
Warner
shape than they are
to
now,
Eli Manning. And guess what? They weren't very good in the 7 starts that Eli Manning had. They were 1-6, and the only win that he had was in week 17. So, I mean, but Eli Manning talked about how invaluable it was to be able to get that experience going into year 2, his first full offseason with his team, understanding what he needed to work on in order to play the quarterback position at a high level in the NFL. I think this is the organization trying to do the same thing for Daniel Jones to give him every opportunity to try to realize his potential. I said it way back in April when the Giants made the decision to take Jones with a top 10 pick. The organization needs to focus on doing everything that they can to support that decision. 2018 ain't about the farewell tour for Eli Manning.
I agree.
It ain't about trying to get to the postseason. It's about Daniel Jones getting an opportunity to get experience and hopefully that puts him in better shape going into 2020.
And that's the thing, too, right? I mean, when you come out of these seasons where you have a rookie quarterback, a first-round pick, for example, and you know eventually he is going to become the face of your franchise, I almost think that wins and losses become of secondary nature because at the end of, what are we, in 2019, if you're a fan of the New York Giants, if you're a fan of the Washington Redskins, for example, teams that took quarterbacks in the first round, you want to say, Dwayne Haskins, this is assuming he gets on the field, for example. You want to get to the end of the year and take the wins and losses aside and say, you know what? We're moving forward with our quarterback. We have our guy. Like, you need to have that peace of mind as an organization, a fan base saying, all right, things didn't work out how we wanted to this season, but I'm confident in where we're going moving forward. We have the direction. We have a purpose. Philadelphia, Carson Wentz, you said that about him after the first year. Even the Jets last year with Sam Darnold, Cleveland, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Buffalo, Lamar Jackson with Baltimore. All those guys, we have a solution to the most important position in the game. And Daniel Jones, if he could stay healthy, is going to have 14 opportunities probably to at least give the Giants the answer to that question.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The best way for a player to improve is to actually play in meaningful games. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
There's only so much that you can learn in the exhibition season, only so much you can do in practice and in the classroom. You have to get out there and you actually have to do it, especially at the quarterback position when you're operating the offense, when you're getting the plays in the huddle, you're giving it to your guys, and then you're getting into the line of scrimmage, and you're having to make reads, diagnose the defense, understand what your guys are supposed to be doing. Daniel Jones will have that opportunity now. And so for me, when you look at what the Giants were in the last 34 games, that's 2 seasons, and then, of course, the first 2 games of this year, they're 8-26.
Is that good?
No, it's not good. It's not good. And so I think that you realize that this team is rebuilding. Usually when you take a quarterback in the top 10, your team is rebuilding.
Right. You're doing it
That's
for a
the
reason.
reality of it. Listen, I understand people want to point to what Kansas City did 3 years ago. Listen, that is the outlier. I mean, and remember, Andy Reid traded up from 27 to get the 10 to take Pat Mahomes.
Yep.
But you look at all the other teams in recent memory. You mentioned the Jets. Also Carson Wentz with the Eagles. Jared Goff is another guy to think about. Listen, Mitch Trubisky, another one in Chicago. And guess what? Those teams dealt with the growing pains of those young quarterbacks in their rookie seasons, but going into year 2, all of those teams were in good shape. They were in good position. And guess what? Those 3 teams, Jared Goff, Mitch Trubisky, and Carson Wentz, they all made the playoffs with that quarterback in year 2. So it doesn't have to be this long, drawn-out process to your team becoming competitive. You'll actually have an opportunity, but I think it starts with getting your young guy on the field and letting him get that experience.
And I'm glad you brought up the Eli situation to draw a parallel to even his career, because in 2004, when he took over, as you said, Giants were in a lot better shape then than they are right now. They were 5-4. They were at least in the conversation for a playoff spot, and then things went south. I remember, my gosh, Eli had a game in Baltimore against that Ravens defense. Didn't he have like a 0
I thought he was going to die.
Yeah. He looked as bad, and as you talk about deer in the headlights, but you gain that experience. Then there was that game, I think it was like the second to last weekend of the season that year, a Saturday, against fellow rookie Roethlisberger at the old Giant Stadium, and it was a shootout between the two. It was a great game. Then the finale against the Cowboys. But
the rest of that decade, you were talking about the New York Football Giants being a playoff contender.
Starting the next season.
Exactly.
They won the division the next year in 2005. Now, it was a bad playoff game against Carolina, but still, they won the division. And those games that he got in 2004, which may have jeopardized your season that year, they proved invaluable moving forward. And clearly, no Giant fan is going to complain what you got from Eli Manning over these subsequent seasons, and you hope that you're talking about even half that with what you see from Daniel Jones. Do you have frequent heartburn, like the kind where you have antacid stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I mean. You keep some in your bag or your desk or your car or your nightstand. You have those chalky tablets ready for whenever and wherever heartburn strikes. Well, listen up. There's an easier way to deal with your heartburn. Prilosec OTC. Just 1 pill a day will last a full 24 hours with 0 heartburn. Kick your antacid habit. It's possible with Prilosec OTC. Use as directed for 14 days to treat frequent heartburn, not for immediate relief. Daniel Jones just